Starting off at the bottom of the barrel at number 11, Attack of the Clones. The goddamn Star Wars prequels, they're just not good. Now, I strongly considered putting Phantom Menace as the worst, but when it comes to Attack of the Clones, almost everything about this entire film is just absolutely atrocious. Not just bad, not just meh, atrocious. From the flawed CGI, the terrible dialogue, the indecipherable story, and especially the cringy romance between Anakin and Padme, like the way how they interact with each other is just absolutely laughable to watch. Like, they really try to convince movie critics that Anakin and Padme wanted to fuck each other. Like, it just does not work at all.
I truly, deeply love you.
And that sucks because Hayden Christensen and especially Natalie Portman are actually great actors, but they just came off to be super cheesy in this film. But with that being said, I don't want to be completely dismissive of everything about Attack of the Clones because there are a few things that I think are very entertaining. I thought Jango Fett was awesome, especially during the fight scene between him and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Count Dooku was an exceptional villain, even though he doesn't show up until like nearly the third act of the film. And we even got to see Yoda in a lightsaber battle for the first time. Like, who doesn't want to see that? But even with all that, it still couldn't save the fact that Attack of the Clones is just a huge bloated mess of a film. But hey, on the bright side, at least it's way better than all the Michael Bay Transformers movies, am I right? Coming in number 10, Phantom Menace. Yet again, another crappy film from the prequels. Now, Phantom Menace was definitely one of the most highly anticipated movies of all time because before it was released, there hadn't been a Star Wars movie in over 16 years. Despite the astronomical hype around it, the film failed in almost every way possible. But the main reason why I rank it above Attack of the Clones because I feel like it has a lot more redeeming qualities to it. I thought the origin of Palpatine was great. Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor were definitely the saving graces of this entire film for me because they're absolutely fantastic in their respective roles as Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And the battle scene with them against Darth Maul is, in my opinion, the greatest lightsaber duel of all time. And yes, I said it of all time because that film was just absolutely awesome to see. But even with all that, it still couldn't save the fact that everything in this film was just bad. From the way they underutilized Darth Maul, the horrendous CGI, the cheesy dialogue, having Anakin start off as a whiny little 9-year-old kid was just a terrible start to his character. And the worst of all was unequivocally Jar Jar Binks. My god, I just gotta say, he just annoyed the hell out of me. Listening to Jar Jar Binks is like the equivalent of me listening to somebody scratching a plate with a fork. And the fact that he got more screen time than Darth Maul is just so beyond me. I do appreciate what George Lucas was trying to do, as I thought the ideas for the film were great, but I just thought he did an extremely poor job of executing the story. Coming at number 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Now, I strongly considered putting The Last Jedi at this very spot, but after watching this for the first time, I just remember leaving the theaters with my head hung very low. Because much like X-Men Dark Phoenix, this movie to me is just a pure example of how you end a movie franchise in the worst way possible. Now, I will say, the CGI looks great, the film has some classic Star Wars vibe to it, and some of the action scenes are very fun to watch. But those are just like the only good things that I can say about this film. The entire movie just felt very rushed. Most, if not all, the main characters get shafted and wasted, and I just feel like it just focuses too much on trying to please movie critics than just making a coherent film. And my biggest gripe about this entire movie was bringing back Palpatine. Now, I understood why they brought him back because of the way how they prematurely killed off Snoke in The Last Jedi, but it just kind of really pissed me off that they brought him back because if you really think about it, that means that Anakin Skywalker's death in Return of the Jedi was just absolutely pointless because he was supposed to die a hero, especially with his amazing redemption arc. But the fact that they brought back Palpatine in this film, that means that Anakin pretty much just died for nothing, so that was just such a heartbreaker. And they also even added a plot twist where Rey turns out to be the granddaughter of Palpatine. Like, what? The Rise of Skywalker had a great opportunity to do something special, but it just miserably failed at doing that. This movie did have finality to it, but it was just the type of finality that just left a very poor taste in my mouth, given the fact that this is the ending to the entire Star Wars movie franchise, for God's sakes.
Who are you?
I'm Rey.
Rey who?
Rey Skywalker.
Coming at number 8, The Last Jedi. Talk about dropping the ball. Now, The Last Jedi will definitely go down in history as one of the most polarizing and divisive movies of all time because movie critics were ultimately split on it. You have those who passionately defend this movie to death, but yet you have those who just downright despise it. Now, despite my mixed feelings, this movie was definitely a huge letdown because it took everything of what made The Force Awakens so incredibly solid and just practically took a huge shit on it. Critics hated the direction of the movie, hated the way how Luke Skywalker was written, hated the cringeworthy humor, and hated the way how some unnecessary characters were added to the film, such as the likes of Rose and Admiral Holdo. Oh yeah, and let's not forget about that comically stupid casino sequence. I just wish they completely scrapped that, because not only was that a waste of time, it's literally one of the most embarrassing things you could ever put in a Star Wars movie. However, I do think there are a few things from this film that I do find a bit diverting. The visuals are absolutely stunning. All of the scenes with Kylo Ren and Rey are just absolutely wonderful, especially when it came to that awesome throne room sequence. Mark Hamill probably gives his greatest performance as Luke Skywalker in this movie, despite the fact that I hated how it ruined some of the aspects of the character. And I also love some of the themes that this film has, like dealing with your past mistakes, failure, and personal growth. I just thought it was very heartbreaking how this movie completely ignored some of the aspects that we got in The Force Awakens that we were supposed to get in this movie. I don't hate it like most people do online, because I feel like there are some things from this film that are a bit misunderstood, but overall it's just very underwhelming. Coming at number 7, Solo. Now, Solo is kind of like the black sheep of the Star Wars movies, because it was something that most diehard Star Wars fans didn't really ask or even care for. But the reason why I rank it this high, because personally I enjoyed this film for what it was. Is it anything spectacular? No. Does it really do anything for the Star Wars universe? No. But I do think it's a pretty fun movie. While sure, some of the aspects of this film do come off to be very stale, the entire film had a very forgettable plot, and I thought the origin of how he received his name felt very flat and lazy, like they just gave us Han Solo. Like, really? That's how we got his name? But even with all that, I do feel like there's a few good things sprinkled in this film. I absolutely love the character of Enfys Nest. Han meeting Chewbacca for the first time in that jail scene was just so perfectly executed. I thought that was very charming. Alden Ehrenreich did a pretty good job of portraying younger Han Solo, even though he's nowhere near as great as Harrison Ford, because that's a very difficult task. And casting Donald Glover as the younger version of Lando was just absolutely spot on. He perfectly nailed the character, and for me, honestly, he was like the show stealer of this entire film. Now, like what I said, I do understand that Solo was a Star Wars movie that felt very unnecessary and pointless, but it's a huge guilty pleasure for me, and I always have a good time rewatching it. Coming at number 6, Revenge of the Sith. Now, I'm definitely one of those people who truly believe that Revenge of the Sith is way better than most people give it credit for, because the movie is a huge step up from Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace. Plus, this was the Star Wars movie that introduced me to Star Wars in the first place. Revenge of the Sith has earned a lot more respect over the past 15 years since its release, and rightfully so, because I feel like there's a lot of things that movie critics can really enjoy from it. While it's far from being a perfect movie, it definitely has such an engaging story to it. The film demonstrated Anakin Skywalker's fall from grace and how he eventually becomes Darth Vader. I can really tell how all of the actors really stepped up their game in this film, as they all delivered the best performances of the trilogy.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them! I hate you! You were my brother, Anakin! I loved you!
However, with that being said, this movie definitely had some major flaws to it. The CGI just did not look that good. The writing was just not particularly the strongest. The entire film just came off to be super campy. The Anakin Padme romance still just did not work for me at all. And I also feel like the way they transitioned Anakin to the dark side just felt a little too rushed. But even with this flaws, Revenge of the Sith is by far the best Star Wars film out of the prequels by far. And I feel like if a couple things were improved in this film, I honestly would have ranked it higher. Coming at number 5, The Force Awakens. After the Star Wars prequels came to a close 10 years prior, The Force Awakens will help reestablish the boundaries of the Star Wars universe into the Disney era, as it broke numerous box office records. But to put all that aside, it was just such a magnificent combination of old and new, introducing a new cast of actors such as Daisy Ridley as Rey, John Boyega as Finn, Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, and Adam Driver, who made such a fantastic villain in Kylo Ren. In addition, it also brings back some of our beloved characters such as Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and Han Solo.
Chewie. We're home.
The film has great humor, the pacing was on point, the special effects looks amazing, and the action scenes are very stellar. I do have to knock this film just a couple notches because I feel like they didn't really took enough risks. Some of the things that were introduced didn't really feel different or unique, like having a third Death Star, which was very silly. And especially the way how people have heavily criticized this film for being a knockoff version of A New Hope, which I can see, but I feel like the entire plot of the film felt like a love letter to A New Hope, as it was borrowing some elements rather than just copying every single thing from it. But overall, The Force Awakens was definitely a very solid re-entry into Star Wars that may have not worked for a lot of people, but overall, it's a well-written film that's very enjoyable to watch. Coming at number 4, Rogue One. Now, to me, Rogue One is definitely the greatest Star Wars movie to be released under the Disney umbrella, because I was so surprised of how good it turned out to be, because it was way better than I expected it. On paper, this movie honestly should have failed due to the behind-the-scenes drama, but Rogue One really stands out on its own because it had such an amazing concept to it, and it had such a unique style that I've never really seen in a Star Wars movie before. I love the dark tone of the film, I love the creativity, the cinematography is merely flawless, and the action scenes are just absolutely spectacular, especially when it came to the final act where Darth Vader's appear in the darkness with his red lightsaber, and all of those rebel pilots just have that look of terror in their faces, and they all get savagely murdered by Vader. It was just like watching a horror movie. Like, that was so awesome to see. But with that being said, I do feel like Rogue One has some serious issues. Some of the elements of this film just came off to be a bit slow. The first act just felt very messy, and I also had a difficult time kind of connecting with the main characters, as most of them just came off to be very forgettable. Even with this flaws, director Gareth Edwards did a very stellar job of telling the story of Rogue One, which takes place several days before A New Hope, as it served to be a very good spin-off to A New Hope.
What is it they've sent us?
Hope.
Coming at number 3, Return of the Jedi. Now, Return of the Jedi is hands down my absolute favorite out of all the Star Wars movies, because this is the one that I find the most rewatchable. I do think it's the weakest of the original trilogy, but it's still a pretty damn good movie. It's such an exquisite crowd pleaser that manages to capture the feel of the first two movies while having its own direction, with an excellent wrap up to this amazing saga. The film also has one of the greatest third acts of any movie of all time, with so much going on at once. You had the lightsaber showdown between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, then you had Lando leading the charge in the space battle to destroy Death Star, and you even had the ground battle with Chewbacca, Han, and Leia battling clones with the help of the Ewoks. Now, this may be very controversial when I say this, but I personally like the Ewoks. I get why a lot of people don't like them and why they always complain about the Ewoks, but I personally thought they made a great addition to this movie. Darth Vader's redemption arc was definitely the true highlight of this entire film, because we get to see Vader turn back into Anakin Skywalker by seeing the good in him, and that's all thanks to Luke, as he was able to bring that out of him, thus proving that Anakin truly was the chosen one after all, and he dies a hero. And while I may have had a few major nitpicks with Return of the Jedi, it was definitely a great and satisfying conclusion to the original trilogy. Coming at number 2, A New Hope. Yep, the very film that introduced us to the Star Wars crave as we know it today. After years of struggling to put this film to the big screen, George Lucas's creative vision finally became a reality in 1977. A New Hope really stands out on its own as a fun, action-packed flick for people of all ages. The way it had such a massive impact on pop culture and filmmaking was just absolutely remarkable, because it's such a well-crafted film with brilliant storytelling and introducing characters we've come to love, from Luke Skywalker, the beautiful Princess Leia, Han Solo, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and C-3PO. I really don't see how people can dislike this film, because from start to finish, this movie is just absolutely brilliant. From Luke Skywalker's amazing character arc, from being extremely whiny to being a mature character, his relationship with Obi-Wan, which is definitely like one of the most endearing things about this film, especially the way how Obi-Wan teaches him how to be a Jedi, John Williams' remarkable musical score, the drama, and so much more. Well, sure, people could criticize the dated special effects, but even with A New Hope being released over 4 decades later, it still remains a timeless classic. I strongly considered putting this at number 1, but that would be... And coming at nobody's surprise at number 1, The Empire Strikes Back. Now, this probably may have been the most predictable spot on this list, to be honest, but come on, I'm pretty sure all y'all expected this to be number 1. Yep, The Empire Strikes Back is unequivocally the quintessential Star Wars movie, but not just that, it's one of the all-time greatest films ever made, because this movie became the blueprint of how you should make a spectacular sequel, as it built upon everything from A New Hope by kicking things up a notch with having a much more darker story. Merely everything about this is just absolutely flawless, from the cinematography, the dialogue, the pacing, and especially the amazing character arcs. From the blossoming romance between Han Solo and Princess Leia, to even introducing us to new characters like Lando, and especially Master Yoda. Like, it's just filled with so many fantastic and iconic moments that are just so unforgettable. Not to mention the fact that this film gave us one of the greatest plot twists in film history with this iconic scene.
I am your father.
It's not true. That's impossible.
It's so astonishing to the point where I can't even say one bad thing about this film. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. It is a bona fide classic sci-fi flick that will live on forever in filmmaking, which is why it definitely deserves the number 1 spot on this list. And that's the list. So what do y'all think? Do you disagree? If so, let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for weekly videos. I'm your boy Micah J, and peace.